All right, so I got to give you guys a border update. This is really important. So the other day we discussed there was a Supreme Court decision which came down 5-4, by the way, which said, hey, the federal government is in charge of the border. Now, this is upholding a very basic principle in constitutional law. It's the supremacy clause, the idea that federal law overrides state law. Because what was happening was, in Texas, the Texas National Guard was sent to the southern border. And they were putting up razor wire and razor buoys all over the place. And there were a number of instances of people literally dying because they drowned in the river as a direct result of what the Texas National Guard was doing. So Border Patrol agents, federal Border Patrol agents said to them, hey man, we're on the same team here, but you need to let us do our job. You need to let us do our thing. So sometimes we have to get by the razor wire. Sometimes we have to save somebody who's drowning. You know, we're all trying to uphold the law here, but you're not above us in the chain of command. In the hierarchy, you are below us. You're the Texas National Guard. We are federal border agents. Okay? So there was a dispute over this. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld the supremacy clause. It's shocking it was a 5-4 vote. It really should have been a 9-0 vote. And the Texas governor looked at the court's decision and he said, yeah, disagree. I'm going to go ahead and send more razor wire down to the border. I'm going to send more Texas National Guard. And by the way, all other conservative governors in the country, send your National Guard as well. And so now we have a full-blown constitutional crisis. We have, I think it's all the way up to 25 states with conservative Republican governors who are like, okay, we're going to send our National Guard down there. And if the federal government won't protect the border, then we will go protect the border. So again, let's be clear. This isn't a left-right disagreement. This isn't a liberal-conservative disagreement. Both sides in this conversation are conservative. The federal government and the federal border patrol agents are saying, let us do our job at the border. We're in charge of the border. And now the Texas State National Guard and various other conservative state National Guards are like, no, we're going to overrule you, and we're going to be more draconian and more extreme and put more razor wire and do whatever the hell to get in your way. Okay. So it is a genuine constitutional crisis when the Texas governor and all these other Republican governors say, piss off Supreme Court with your ruling, piss off federal government. We're going to take this into our own hands. Okay. But now there's been some updates here which are amazing. So in the midst of all of this, it's not like Joe Biden and the Senate and the politicians aren't trying to draft some sort of a new border bill, right? They're actually in the midst of doing that. So we learned the other day, Biden and some Republican, they're negotiating and they're like, okay, we're this close to a deal. We got it. So here's what we learned. Breaking Senate border deal details per source familiar I just had a call with. This is from a Fox News national correspondent who gives us some of the specifics of what's in the deal that was reached. Mandatory detention of all single adults. Mandatory shutdown of the border once an average daily migrant encounters hit 5,000. Importantly, this 5,000 number includes 1,400 Customs and Border Patrol agents, one app entries at ports of entry per day, and roughly 3,600 illegal crossings per day. How is it enforced? Once the 5,000 threshold is hit, a new authority is codified into law that requires Border Patrol to immediately remove illegal immigrants they catch without processing. They would not get to request asylum. They would immediately be removed. This includes removals back to Mexico and deportations to home countries. This would be a massive change from current policy, which is that once an illegal immigrant reaches U.S. soil, they must be processed via Title VIII and allowed to claim asylum. Under this new authority, they are not processed and they are mandatorily immediately removed once the shutdown threshold is reached. This shutdown also takes effect if there are 8,500 migrant encounters in a single day. The shutdown would not lift the next day. It wouldn't lift until daily encounters are reduced to under 75% of the 5,000 threshold for at least 2 weeks. This means the shutdown authority would not lift until 2 weeks of an average of less than 3,750 migrant encounters per day. Some family units will be released with ATD, alternatives to detention, ankle monitors, etc. New removal authority to immediately remove all migrants who do not have valid asylum claims will be determined within 6 months rather than the years-long process we have right now. Any migrant caught trying to cross twice during shutdown phase would be banned from entering the U.S. for 1 year. U.S. will need agreement with Mexico to take back non-Mexican illegal immigrants. This hasn't been ironed out yet. President Biden approves of the deal and is ready to sign it as is right now and implement new the new authority it would give him. So those are all the specifics, but the gist of this is Biden comes out and he says, I will shut down the border on day one if you pass this. So he's saying to the right, I agree with you. I agree with you. All Trump's, hardcore anti-immigrant border stuff, I agree. I'm on your side. I will shut down the border on day one. Pass this bill. It gives me the authority, and I'll just totally shut it down. He said that a number of times. In fact, here, I'll give you the exact quote. What's been negotiated would be the toughest and fairest set of reforms to secure the border we've ever had in our country. It would give me, as president, a new emergency authority to shut down the border when it becomes overwhelmed. And he goes on to say, this is like a nonpartisan thing. I'll sign this bill immediately. I will shut the border down. So, what happened after all that? Trump goes out there, gives a speech, and he says, no, I'm against this deal. Well, hold on. This is literally exactly what you and everybody on the right have always wanted when it comes to a border deal. It gives the president authority to totally shut it down. And he said he'd do it on day one. Trump goes, no, I'm against this. Now, why is he against it? Because from the right-wing perspective, they think, hey, this is a tough deal. This is a hardcore anti-immigration bill. And we don't want to give Biden what they perceive as a win. I'm not kidding. So look, there are some Republicans in the Senate that are negotiating in good faith. And they're like, holy cow, I'm shocked that we're getting all these things that we want as Republicans and conservatives from Joe Biden on the border. But Trump comes out and says, no, tank the deal. And guess what? The House Republicans, the hardcore MAGA ones, are like, okay, we'll tank the deal. What? So in other words, guys, understand something. The people who are opposed to this, they don't have a principled belief in anything when it comes to policy. In anything. This would be the equivalent of a Republican governor saying to the left, you know what? I've seen the light. I want Medicare for all. I'll sign a bill for Medicare for all right now. And then the left goes, how dare you? I'm against that. No, I don't want that. Well, I don't care how the hell we get it. But I want Medicare for all. You can't get me to flip on a hardcore policy principle I have because somebody I don't like proposed it. Obviously, the devil's in the details and all that stuff matters. But if we're actually proposing Medicare for all from a Republican, of course I'd take it. All these Republicans are like, no, I will not take it. So this is really interesting. Here you have James Lankford, Republican senator, and he's going to spill the tea a little bit here about what's going on in the Republican caucus and how insane this is.
That are not being enforced. So why give him this election year, the cover of this deal that, critics say is still going to let a lot of people in, but he gets to take a victory lap that he's gotten something done.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not going to let a bunch of people in. It's focused on actually turning people around on it. It is interesting. Republicans 4 months ago would not give funding for Ukraine, for Israel, and for our southern border because we demanded changes in policy. So we actually locked arms together and said, we're not going to give you money for this. We want a change in law. And now it's interesting, a few months later, when we're finally getting to the end, they're like, oh, just kidding. I actually don't want to change in law because it's a presidential election year. We all have an oath to the Constitution, and we have a commitment to say we're going to do whatever we can to be able to secure the border. Just as a quick, for instance, the last 4 months, we've had 50 people cross our border on the terror watch list. 50. We've had tens of thousands of people that were declared by this administration a national security risk that came across our border and were released. It is our constitutional obligation to be able to secure our country as fast as we can secure our country. This puts in mandatory pieces that haven't been there in the past to make this administration actually enforce the law. I would say I don't know of anyone that believes that if President Trump was elected, well, he was president right now, this border would not have this problem. So the thought that somehow President Biden can suddenly be the pro-national security president in the final months of this is...
So, in other words, let me sum up what this guy's saying. He's like, hold on, wait, I actually believe in something. I actually am hardcore anti-immigration. I'm strong on the border, et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, I don't understand. How can Republicans say you want to be tough on the border, and then here we get a deal, which is the toughest immigration deal in decades. This is the toughest immigration deal in modern American history. It is a right-wing wet dream, this deal. And he's like, I don't get it. Well, how can Republicans be against it? And you heard the Fox host laid it out. Well, we think this gives Biden a win going into an election year, so that's why we're against it. That's like, okay, but then don't pretend like you believe in literally anything. All you are is a total partisan hack. There's nothing at the core of you in terms of policy preferences or beliefs. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So we have a hilariously ironic situation here where the House Republicans, the hardcore MAGA folks, and Trump himself, now they're the ones who are like, we don't want a right-wing border reform. And it's Biden and Senate Republicans, and probably House Democrats and Senate Democrats too, who are like, we would like a harsh border deal. And it goes to show you, man, how everything these days is just partisan. Everything is hyper partisan. Everything is red team, blue team. Everything is can't give them a win, even if it's an optical win. Everything is, I know I said I believed in this thing and you're giving it to me, but now I'm against it. It's just like, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Obamacare debate. Back when Obama was trying to get healthcare reform through, his position ended up being the Heritage Foundation's position, which is a right-wing think tank. It was, let's do a healthcare reform that involves forcing people to pay private insurers to get their coverage. An individual mandate system. This was a conservative Republican answer to a public option or Medicare for all, to single payer. And then as soon as Obama came out in favor of it and the Democrats came out in favor of it, a bunch of the Republicans were like, no, I'm against it. In fact, almost all of the Republicans were like, I'm against it. So it's like, I don't know how you talk to or negotiate with somebody who literally believes absolutely nothing. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how you do that. But it's a hilariously ironic situation we're in, because now it's almost like the Trump position and the House Republican position, it's almost like they accidentally ended up being less harsh on the border. Now, that's not totally true, because then if Trump gets in office, I'm sure he would try to get an even more harsh bill through, right? An even harsher immigration bill through. So that's not exactly right. But the fact remains they are effectively killing this border reform. Okay, so now, again, let's just point out in conclusion here how ironic it is that the Texas National Guard and all the Republican governors are like, you're being so weak on the border, and that's why we're going to send our troops there and override you. And Biden and the Democrats are like, I'm willing to go super extreme to be harsh on the border, but the Republicans won't accept it. So look, my main takeaway from this story is like nothing in this country functions anymore. Nothing is easy. Nothing is simple. Nothing is normal. Everything's hyper-partisan garbage. Nothing makes sense. You know, it's just every aspect of this is wild. And apart from the discussion about this particular border deal, let's just remember, it really is a constitutional crisis. Because what are you going to have? Federal Border Patrol agents doing a standoff with the National Guard, conservative National Guard from various different states? Is that where we're at? And it seems like the answer is yes. And the entire time that they're screaming, oh, Biden's so weak on the border, he's like, I'm willing to be incredibly harsh, harsher than anything you've ever seen. And they're like, no, but you're still weak, bro. I've never seen anything so stupid, so contradictory, so hypocritical. I literally can't get my mind around how, like, all this stuff, you can logically trace it and you could follow the steps here, but like ultimately, from a macro view, none of this makes sense. None of this makes any sense. None of it makes any sense, and that's super clear. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.